Hello, my friends, and welcome to What's Up. I'm John Peterson from the Arlington Institute, and Gregg Braden and I get together like this for an unstructured half-hour conversation every 2 weeks just to explore whatever is on either of our minds. And I'm happy to have you back with us again, Gregg. Thank you for
John, it's
being
good to see you.
available.
Yeah, I'm coming to you from the command deck of the
Yeah.
mothership here in the Santa Fe studio, and this is unstructured. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Right. And we here at the Arlington Institute are happy to bring this together every couple of weeks, as well as quartet and any number of other kind of program things that those of our viewers who are following this can learn more about at arlingtoninstitute.org. So what's up? What's on your mind, my friend?
Well, you and I had a brief conversation about there's so much happening in the world, John. It's easy to get lost in the weeds because we're inundated with Trump and economy and Ukraine and all of that. You and I are both system thinkers, and we tend to look for the common denominator and go to the core of whatever it is that's happening. And one of the pieces that is rarely talked about anymore is the science that suggests that we may in fact be living in a simulated
Yeah.
reality. So everything that we're seeing right now is part of that simulation, including the disclosure, including UFOs, life in other worlds,
Yeah,
all of those things.
it's like being inside of a big computer game, that where you've got these very complex AI-based kind of algorithms that allow, kind of an infinite number of branching possibilities. So you make one decision, then it reconfigures the world in another kind of way. And it's I've been thinking about that because I got exposed again the other night to another kind of proponent for this point of view, who has done a great deal of research and is very convincing that this is the way it goes. And the thing that's interesting to me about it is that it is kind of a minor emergent track and possibility in the kind of the spectrum, the panoply of options that most people think about in terms of thinking about the future. I mean, there's one big one that is, of course, the technology and technocracy and where it's all going and why they're going to control you. There's a kind of a smaller space, of course, where you and I operate a lot, and a lot of our friends, that is all about love and light and meditation and all of those kinds of things, and aliens and UFOs and whatever. And yet there's this emergent kind of thing. It's almost as though with the movie Matrix, they kind of laid it into the space, perhaps because they had to. I don't understand how that all works, but some people suggest that's the case. They laid this idea in there, and it is this kind of background thing that someday they can come and say, well, we told you. I mean, the fact that you didn't kind of pick up on it is not our fault. But when you think about it, as you have a great deal, and I have a good bit, it is really disruptive idea. It is because it goes to the core of a lot of things that we think about in terms of the creator and the source and personal kind of independence and our who we are as individuals. It's there's you play with this a little bit in your mind, and you kind of, if the question is, how big is the simulation? Is it a little one where it's just kind of you or something like that, or is it really bigger? Is the source, as we understand it, inside the larger one? It's just really really disruptive from a kind of an intellectual and a structural point of view, and it's aggravated and exacerbated by the fact that there are increasing numbers, small numbers, admittedly, but that are coming to the conclusion that the whole thing kind of gets reset at some point in the future, in the near future, that whoever punches the button and it resets itself. And that is, what's that have to do with love and light and UFOs? And, well, and I'm not depreciating that at all, because, as you know, I've spent a great deal of my time there. But I mean, it's just a really interesting kind of a emergent kind of idea that is quite at odds with the kind of conventional way in which we think about things.
Wow, John, I love the way you think. That's why I love these conversations. And when I have them with friends, just locally, and again, when I'm not traveling, a lot of my social contact happens in my community at the grocery store. It's actually it's a co-op. And that's where people come and they socialize as well as buying the groceries, that they need. And when we've had these conversations, what I've discovered, John, is it's you and I are so accustomed to thinking in this space. And if you speak to someone who's not, the concept is so abstract that it's really difficult to even, to have the conversation. So I think the important thing to really take from this, and the truly disruptive piece, is that if we are all sharing a simulated reality, it means we're part of that program. We're not separate from it. And it means that we have the ability to interface directly and influence, not control, not manipulate, but influence outcomes in our lives, which is very parallel to the philosophical traditions of many ancient and spiritual and religious traditions, coming from a different perspective, but they're saying the same thing. We have the ability within us to influence what happens in our bodies, but what happens in our lives, in our world as well. If you think of us as programs, you're the John program, I'm the Gregg program, and we're running within a bigger program.
Yeah.
Now, my physicist friends, I've got some that are working on some pretty disruptive physics right now. And one of the ideas that is gaining traction is the mystery of time within this simulation. That time, that physicists will tell you, if you throw time out of the equations, it's possible to unify the fundamental forces of physics. They can't. Time, it's always been, if you read the papers, it's actually called the problem of time. Well, now what they're looking at is that time may actually be the program that's driving the simulation. It's the time program moving forward, and all the things. Time is providing the structure that allows all of the events to happen so they're not piled on top of one another. So it's one way to think about that.
That sounds like it's a derivative of Einsteinian kind of quantum stuff. And I would argue that they haven't read Walter Russell, and they haven't looked at the possibility it's an all electric world. And I've been reading a number of Walter Russell books lately, and what he argues specifically is that everything, a trillion times a second, everything exists and then decreases. It expands and collapses, and that is where time shows up, because you get this difference between the expansion and the other variation is that a convention that I would argue is conventional physics has no provision for a creator or any outside force there, whether it's particle physics or whether it's the wave function kinds of stuff. It's all presumed that what you see is what you got. And the notions that I'm reading about and that seem to make a lot of sense to me are much bigger and broader than that.
Oh, I agree, John. I think the electric universe is the theory that's probably going to be the theory that, is going to be taught in the universities in the next generation. But the idea of us living in this simulation, being part of it, each of us being a program in the simulation, and the reset idea that you're talking about. If something doesn't change, it appears that we are on track for an abrupt reset of some kind. On the physical realm, what that looks like is, in our world, is that the core of our planet, the physics of the inner core of the Earth, are playing a powerful role in this,
Hmm.
and that the, I mean, as a geologist, it's fascinating to me that the inner core actually floats in a molten, in the typically in the center of a molten substance that's the outer core. It's an iron nickel molten core, and it's that rotation that creates the disturbances in the mantle that make the magnetic field of our planet, that protect us from cosmic rays and incoming. And as that core is going through the shifts that are now being recognized, including coming to a stop right now, the core appears to be quiet. It's not rotating.
Yeah.
And the question is, what does that mean for us? Well, you mentioned this earlier, and this is fascinating to me. It takes a really small amount of energy to create the magnetic field that protects the Earth. It's not actually a very strong field at all. And the strongest magnetic generator on our planet in biological terms is the human heart. And we've got about 8 billion of those little magnetic generators on the planet. So it suggests in this simulation that not 8 billion necessarily, but if enough people come together from this heart space that is in our evolutionary interest, that we actually have the ability to influence the dynamics of the core that's driving this whole system. And I think that is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's the, in the area again where we operate, that it's mentioned in passing, that consciousness essentially has the ability to shape the larger reality. But there's not much it doesn't go much further than that in terms of what are the mechanics or the processes, and how do you get to literally do it, and how do you get a critical mass of people, and how do you get trained, and whatever it turns out to be, if in fact that it plays such a central role, which certainly makes sense to me, and certainly in terms of the things that I understand, or I think I understand, that may be the kind of the ultimate solution to all of this, both in terms of mitigating the near term kind of disturbances and possibilities, but also in terms of building the new world and starting to build the imagery and the ideas for and the vision for what a new world might look
So
like.
this is, and I agree, John, this is synthesis thinking, because we've always, even in my genre, we're taught to compartmentalize everything. So
Yeah.
here's geology and the earth and climate change, but over here is, here's the spirituality stuff over here. In a simulation, you can't separate those, because we are working in the same, we are programs within the same program. So we have a geologic history for the kind of reset that it looks like we're looking at right now. And that history is only recently been recognized because the data from the ice cores has been skewed in the way that it was being interpreted. When you take away the skewing, what we see is that about every 12,000 years, there is a catastrophic event that resets life on planet Earth. We know it happened 12,000 years from now in our past. It's a time called the Younger Dryas. And it was a time we were coming out of the ice age. We were in a warming, and we went into a sudden cooling, a tremendously what's called abrupt climate change. This is where woolly mammoths were frozen in mid-step with food still in their mouths. That's how quickly it happened. And then we began to warm from there. And the question has been, what caused that? Now that they're looking, and then 24,000 years, they're seeing the same thing happened again, and they're going back in time, and we're asking the wrong question. So scientists and the lay people mainstream media, they've all been saying, is the core of the planet going to reverse? Are we going to change, do a magnetic flip north and south? That I don't think is the question. The question is, when we go through the periods of time where the core slows and comes to a stop, it doesn't always have to reverse, but by coming to a stop, what happens is we drop that magnetic shield that protects us from the cosmic radiation, including from the sun. It heats the planet. It heats the oceans and releases tremendous amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. That's where the CO2 levels are coming from. But it also increases the seismic and the volcanic activity.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's it. 12,000 years ago, we can see in the ice cores, we can see the layers where that happened. And that's what brought on the rapid cooling, the little ice age. Yeah. Yeah. So what we're seeing is, I mean, that happened 12,000 years ago. And what the science now is saying is that the human population dropped to around 140,000. And where they get that number, I'm not sure. But it was down to a very, very low number. It's when Neanderthal went extinct because Neanderthal couldn't cope with it. And a lot of large mammals, the mastodons, woolly mammoths, all of those things went extinct. Megafauna went extinct. So, and we see that happen 24,000 years ago. So we are in the early stages of that happening now. So if it happens, it doesn't mean that we're extinct because we have technology that we didn't have then. However, I think it's interesting the convergence of the physical dynamics that threaten us simultaneously with the spiritual dynamics that can literally save us from the kind of events that we've seen in the past. And this is one of those beautiful places, I think, where science and spirituality come together, because the science now is telling us what's happening, and they're looking for ways to prevent it. And they got some scary scenarios, out there to prevent it. Whereas the spiritual principles, many of them have reconciled themselves. They say, okay, it's the end of the world, just, buckle up and here we go. But now there's a segment of the population that says, well, wait a minute. If we're in a simulation and we're programmed within the program, it means that we have the ability to influence what's happening. And what is the influence? Magnetism from the love of the human heart, incoherence of the brain, influencing the magnetism of the planet. Is it possible that we can actually influence it to the degree that we shift that 12,000 year cycle? And in the simulation, I would argue everything's possible. Everything's possible.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though. If it's a simulation, then who's deciding that this coherence, the heart and the mind, or the level of consciousness, or whatever the thing is that it's monitoring? Who decides and who says, okay, we won't, we won't do it now. We won't do the reset now. Let's wait and see how they do. I mean, I don't know. It's complicated.
I think it's a collective. It would have to be a collective choice, John. I mean, now you come back. If we're in a simulation, who benefits from a simulation? And the answer to that has always been it's the people in the simulation, because in a simulation, in a simulation, you're learning something in a simulation that you're going to need when you go somewhere else. That's always been, the Hindus have always said.
How about the person or bit or who that built the simulation and is running the simulation? Wouldn't they have an interest in?
I think they. Yeah, I think they would. And we talk about this a lot in other programs. I think this is fascinating, John, because it suggests that we are probably the product of a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated society, number one. Right. Who has had computers more than the 70 years that we have, and that those computers are being used to model scenarios to help solve a problem. And the people in the simulation are helping to solve the problem. So,
but is it a game? Is it all a game? Are they solving problems within games?
I don't know. I would be surprised. Let me say it this way: when I'm with large groups of people, and we have this conversation, and it's a really deep, intimate conversation. You can hear a pin drop in the room when we're having this conversation. And the suggestion comes up that we humans, most of the people in the room, I ask, how many of you have ever felt that there's something that you're here for that you can't quite get a handle on? You're here for more than just to have fun. Fun's good, but and you've never felt like you fit really well into your family or world because you've always thought differently. You've had this insight into something. And so people start, I mean, you can see the tears in people's eyes. And then you say, what are the themes playing out in our world today? I mean, not in the weeds, but the big themes. It's about light and dark. It's about love and fear. It's about war and destruction or peace. And I can't help but think that if we are in a simulation, that we are striving for a way of to learn a way of living that transcends war, that has been the hallmark of civilization, that transcends the fear and that transcends the hurt and the suffering. And when I say that to people in the room, it rings so true to so many people that something the simulation, we are benefiting because we're the ones learning a way of being that will help us to transcend these things. And then all the other stuff like fills in the missing pieces. But I think that's the big theme. And who built it?
Maybe, I hope you're right about all this.
Well, maybe our civilization is advanced enough. Maybe we all participated. We said, let's build this simulation. So, and if you're going to try to solve a problem in one simulation, you're probably not going to stop with one. You're going to have multiple simulations running. I would, which means maybe that is what physics is calling parallel universes or multi worlds or multiple universes. Or when we dream at night and we experience these other realities, maybe that's what's happening. We're wandering into some of these other simulations when our consciousness is at ease in our sleep state, because in our waking state, we have to hold the focus right here. So I don't know, John. I think the science now, there's a whole branch of science, and you can actually get a PhD in exploring whether or not we're in a simulated reality. University of Washington was the first to offer the PhD. Nick Bostrom pioneered a lot of this.
Yeah.
And so now they're running experiments. And they're saying, if we are in a simulated environment, you would expect these things to happen on a quantum level. And they are. Those things are. So, for example, the double slit experiment has been rerun so many times now. And the particle, the energy only becomes physical when it is being observed. That is exactly the way a computer game works on your laptop. Your laptop cannot possibly hold all of the images for an entire house simultaneously. So the walls in the room will only come up when you enter that room. And they're saying that's the way our reality appears to be. When we observe is when we actually see the physical reality. And so it appears that our physical reality actually mirrors a computer game. This is, I mean, some of the papers come out in just the last couple of weeks. So I think thinking from a simulation, it puts a new spin on religion, certainly, on God, on death, on hopefully all of the horrors of war and the people that have been lost on the other side of the simulation, they still exist. You know, I hope that's true. I really hope that's true. That and
well, it calls into question the purpose of life, and you know, God takes you right back to some of the big kind of enduring questions.
Well, all of the religions, you know, Christianity, Hindu traditions, Native American, Aboriginal, they all say, number one, they say that this world is an illusion or a dream, or the Hindu call it the Maya. And they say that we're here temporarily. Christian traditions all are talking about, you know, the focus shouldn't be here. It's on somewhere else. Native American traditions say that we're in a dream and we're learning to dream a new dream. That's what they say. And that we're learning something here that we're going to need in the next world. We're learning it here in a relatively safe environment because it's going to be the way of life in the next world. And if that's true, John, it
What do they
has
say? What do they say the next world is?
well, everybody, there are different ideas. You know, from the Hopi perspective, there are three previous worlds, and we now are living in the fourth world. From the Mesoamerican and perspective, there are like the Mayan perspective. There's five worlds, four previous, and we're in the fifth. Depends on how far back in time you want to go. The Hindu traditions all say that we're in a Maya, and the key in this illusion is not to be attached to the sensuality, the physicality, and the sexuality in this world, because that's part of the illusion. It's okay to enjoy it, but don't get attached to it. That's part of the illusion. And they all say we're moving into a new world. Their worlds closely align with the 12,000 year cycles that we see.
So it's the reset of the simulation, right?
Yeah, some kind of a reset. So now, as a computer scientist, when I think about resets, I was in the early years of converting software from big mainframe computers that take up a room onto a desktop or a laptop. And we used to run into limitations all the time. Either there was too much data, too much information that will shut down the system for a reset. A power failure certainly will do that, or some anomaly in the system that the system was never built to accommodate. Those three things will cause a system to shut down and reset. So, if we're in a simulation,
if those were the problems you had that long ago, I would presume that some or group that was 1,000 years in the future would have resolved those.
Well, I would think so, unless maybe it's a built-in reset where we are kind of forced to take into account, okay, you learned all this, let's see you put it to use, and if you didn't, let's try it again.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to know what. Yeah, I don't know. This all calls into question all these kinds of things about human development and consciousness and the ultimate purpose of life and such that I've already suggested, and it's just it almost feels to me. So I had a lunch with a friend of mine today. Very insightful, plugged in, way out plugged in. And she says, of course it's a simulation. We can prove it. Now, the way she and her associates prove it is quite a different way than science proving it. But she had come to the conclusion that there is no question about it. It is a simulation. So now, if that is the case, then you essentially have to lift yourself out of the other two tracks and scenarios and everything and drop yourself into the middle of the simulation one and start to populate that with a whole new set of philosophic and other kinds of concepts that make sense within that space. And I guess that's what I was just suggesting at the beginning, that if it in fact is the truth, and if it's then it's going to force a whole new redo of who we think we are and where we're going and what.
Yeah. Well, I agree, John. And I mean, that was the beginning of the conversation. It may be the greatest disruptor of consciousness to align ourselves with the thinking that as part of the simulation, we are empowered to influence the simulation. That means we are powerful beings within this simulation. That's what the movie The Matrix was telling us all about. And except for the language, John, the language is new because of the science, but the concept that this is a temporary world, it's a dream, and the concept that within a simulation, the experiencer can always communicate outside of the simulation for guidance or for help. If you're in a flight simulator and you run into something you never run into, you say, hey guys, or a docking
Yeah.
maneuver for SpaceX or whatever. We do the same thing. We close our eyes, we go into our heart, and we are communicating with maybe ourselves outside of the simulation, or maybe another intelligence or a higher power. Where does that voice come from? Where does that intuition, where do those insights come from? So except for the language, it's not that much different. Now, one of the places where I've really been fascinated by this was in the mathematic matrix that is the result of the Torah, the first
Yeah.
5 books of the Old
Yeah.
Testament.
Right.
When you convert those to mathematics and you
Yeah.
do the queries, there's all kinds of information in there about what has happened, what may happen, and where we are. But the thing that's always fascinating me is every time you do a query about a great catastrophe. So if you query the words atomic holocaust or viral pandemic,
All right.
you will always, it'll show you that. And then nearby, there will always be a phrase that comes up. Will you change it?
Yeah.
Will you change it?
Yeah, I remember you saying
Yeah.
that.
So, well, it suggests that the Torah is a dynamic matrix, an array of quantum possibilities. And every
Right.
time we make a choice, that whole matrix rearranges itself around that choice for individuals and collectively. Very, very complex. And it was given to us 3,000 years ago. How that sophisticated of a mathematic array would have been built over 3,000 years ago is another conversation, and where it came from. But it all falls into the conversation. Are we in a simulated environment? The science supports it. The ancient traditions suggest it. And then when we go into things like the Torah and Mesoamerican traditions and others, it is giving us insights into a deep mystery that we're in the middle of right now. And I think we owe it to ourselves to consider all those possibilities, not a gaping
Well,
mind, but an open mind.
well, I'd certainly agree with you. All I'd just say is that if you seriously buy into that likelihood possibility, then you've just opened up a giant box of
Yeah.
other kind of questions that you've thought that you've relatively solved in the other areas, and what it's doing is driving you into this space that is very essentially unconsidered. I mean, it's one thing to say it's a simulation as a concept. It's another thing just to say, what's the implications for you and your life and your purpose and this time in life? And what if there is a reset? Then what do you do? And who are you then? And anyway, it just
I think it also opens the door to healthy potentials that bypass the unhealthy baggage that comes
yeah.
with
No,
so
no,
many
no,
of the
I
concepts.
agree.
So I
I
think
mean,
I think we're nearing the end of our conversation here. So I'm going to say, John, on the other side of the simulation, I'm going to buy you a tea, and you
oh,
and I
good.
will sit and over tea we'll talk about how our simulation went, and
I'll
it'll be a
do
lot
that.
of fun.
And I would like to simulate that to be at a beach somewhere, maybe
Beach.
in Mexico somewhere.
I'm
So
with you on that. I'm with you. My friend, thank you for this conversation.
very
It's a
nice.
big conversation.
Nice to be with you, and to all of our friends who've been watching, we thank you. Send us a question, come back and visit us, and go see more about what we are all doing at the Arlington Institute. So be well. Take care.
Thanks so much.